Hi, my name is Angela, and my topic for my explanatory speech is, does online teaching affect learning? So, back in March 2020, we were forced to stay inside our homes and distance ourselves to keep others safe while a pandemic bloomed. With the government telling us to stay home, that meant students everywhere were forced to open up a screen or a tablet and learn for themselves, by themselves, at their house. Now, as the pandemic continued on to the present, there have been studies by multiple colleges and other programs to see how students are comprehending what they are being taught, whether to see if they are achieving or if they are falling behind. And the end results of these studies have shown that COVID-19 not only has affected the way we live, but the way we are to learn. Now, how has online learning changed the way we learn? Well, throughout this speech, I'm going to explain how students were affected and are continuing to be affected. First, I will give you some examples of educators who studied the students affected. Second, I will tell you what some of the difficulties students faced. And lastly, I will also explain what is being done to help change the way we are being affected and who is being affected, and what possible solutions can help those who struggle. And now, students ranging in all ages have been affected by online learning. Now, a study done by Alex Reese-Jones was done on college students because they wanted to see how the pandemic affected students' test outcomes. And they noticed that no specific groups were affected, but more generally, the overall population of their sample. Now, first he looked at outcomes of the spring semester for, I believe it was 2020, and then secondly, they started to compare test scores across semesters to see if there would be any differences. And they continued to check the end of the year test results and found that test scores declined by 0.2 standard deviations when students were learning online. However, they did not find evidence that it changed during certain semesters in 2020. Now, however, those studies have been changing constantly as we continue to progress throughout the years, and it has been, I believe, now 2 years being in a pandemic. And obviously, even I can say it for first-hand experience, I think learning from home has definitely been way different and a little bit more detrimental than being in an in-person class. Now, studies done by the Voice of the Educator Study and another study done by McKinsey & Company back in March 30th, 2021, they have found that remote learning has caused a decrease in performance from students in K-12 public schools. Now, these two programs were noticing that students were facing challenges and falling behind and didn't seem like they had a will to continue on, and they didn't seem like they were being pushed and that they just wanted to continue. Now, these K-12 public schools, they noticed that certain groups were affected by being taught remotely, such as Hispanic and African American students, along with those who have disabilities. Now, students with disabilities were falling behind even more, and aside from that, students were just falling behind rather than advancing and achieving. And unfortunately, despite it being just K-12, even students going up into college, high school were suffering as well and losing opportunities because they weren't able to get the help that they needed and when they needed. Usually, if you're in person, you can go to a counselor or you can go seek some, instructor or teacher for help immediately, usually after class or before class or whenever. Whereas now it was way harder, and certain people and certain, groups were being affected even more than so before. Now, some difficulties that some of the students were facing. As the pandemic bloomed, remote learning became a disadvantage, whether it's college students or middle schoolers, high schoolers, anyone. The drive to learn has decreased. In-person versus remote have different effects on a person. Being isolated at home, most students struggle to focus because they are being surrounded by comfort. An educator, Douglas Leakey, has stated that students were easily distracted and hungry for social interaction. However, some would say that some advantages of learning from home is that you can do it on your own time, you can be a little bit more focused, you can be in your pajamas, you basically can learn whenever you want, at what time you want, still get it done in whatever time you need. Except that, honestly, there's pros and cons with learning from home. Whether pros, you can be as comfortable as you want, you can learn from wherever you want to be in the house or somewhere else. But a con is that you might not be able to get the help that you need right away. And you might be a little bit struggle of you not knowing what to do for an assignment, or you might have just questions in general. And some solutions to help now were in the economic letters back in June 25th, 2021. Some educators learned how to make learning from home more comfortable. Now, back to Alex Reese-Jones, he stated that professors used approaches designed to improve student engagement. A big thing that was going on with the pandemic, and still is that there's a lack of social communication. So, having students working together online has shown to help learning, with both learning and social communication as well. Some educators suggested that tutoring can help students that are struggling with just an online session, or putting people into remote, groups is what it's called. Like you section them off into different classrooms within Zoom or certain remote programs, and that actually helps also with social interaction. Now, after experiencing closure and non-socialization, it has proven that it inhibits the ability to learn. First, I discussed some educators who studied the affected students, then what their difficulties were, and lastly, what some solutions were presented. Remote learning has become an everyday routine, no matter what age or grade level you are at. And honestly, the want to learn has been hard on even myself as a college student. Seeing how we have been moving forward as the pandemic continues, it seems that the teachers have taken certain measures to help us to want to learn and continue to advance and achieve our desired educational goals. Now, especially being open to communicate as much as possible, even from behind a computer screen. And honestly, it has been great that students have been learning also to adapt as the pandemic continues. And that teachers are also being way more willing now than they were before to help students that are struggling with focusing at home. And thank you.